and welcome to Financial Minds Meet the Experts. I'm your host, Jaime Agostino. As you know, on this podcast, we're joined by financial industry experts to talk about topics, trends, and themes that credit union professionals need to know about. Joining me today are 4 credit union professionals to discuss fraud. But before we get started, I just want to give a personal shout out to Cross States Credit Union Association. Nick, thank you, and the Harrisburg chapter for having a wonderful fraud panel discussion a few weeks ago, which gave us the inspiration to this episode. And I may have asked those ladies from that panel discussion to join us today. So welcome, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and let all of you individually introduce yourself, give us a little brief background, and what your current role is in fraud prevention. So we'll go ahead and get started. Michelle, would you mind kicking us off?
Sure. My name is Michele Ford, and I work at Patriot Federal Credit Union. I've been in the financial industry for 34 years. Currently, I'm the Director of Financial Crimes and Fraud Prevention. I oversee the BSA department and also the fraud department. So I have the BSA department and BSA analyst, BSA officer, also the fraud investigator, fraud analyst. So we do a lot within our roles. Also do a lot of the fraud training for Patriot, fraud outreach to the community. If I rewind, I won't go over the whole 34 years of my career in the financial industry, but I have touched in a lot of different roles within the front office and the retail office, in HMDA, security, facilities. I've done a little bit of everything in the financial industry, worked in large financial institutions, small financial institutions. I think in some of my best lessons learned was working in a small financial institution, which was 186 million in assets. You wore lots of different hats. Yeah. You got to learn a lot of different roles. And one of my biggest accomplishments in my career was graduating from the PA Department of Banking with excellence. So I graduated with honors from the PA banking school. So that was an accomplishment, but I like to highlight my team more than anything. So I'm blessed with a great team at Patriot. I'm blessed to work with a great group at Patriot. And so I really don't want to go into too much more of what I've done. But over the years, I've been blessed to work for great leaders who've taught me a lot. And here we are today tackling fraud. So Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for joining. Lauren, would you mind introducing yourself?
Yes. Hi, I'm Lauren Greenaway. Haven't been in the industry quite as long as Michelle, so I don't know if I can top all of that. But I did graduate from college in 2015 with a criminal justice degree. I started my career at a credit union, actually Cornerstone Federal Credit Union, in October of 2016. About less than a year later, we merged with Belco Community Credit Union, which is who I'm with now. And in November of 2017, I started as a fraud and security analyst. Was in that role for about 3 or 4 years, and then the security department kind of moved away. So I just stayed that fraud analyst for quite some time until about a week ago. I recently got a promotion to be the fraud assistant manager at Belco Community Credit Union. So really exciting. I'm super, super proud and excited to just thrive in that role. As Michelle said, she has a great team at Patriot. I have a wonderful team at Belco. I supervise 2 fraud investigators now, and I can't wait to see them grow. I personally became a certified financial crimes investigator back in 2021. So I've been certified for about 4 years. I am currently a vice president of a local collaborative group called South Central Pennsylvania Financial Securities Officers Association. Say that 5 times fast. And I did serve as president of the group prior. So just continuing to train, educate, and combat fraud. And I love it. I wouldn't do anything else.
All right. Well, welcome and congratulations on the promotion.
Thank you.
Right. Amanda, how about you go ahead and introduce yourself?
I just wanted to echo what Michelle and Lauren said. Thank you so much for having us on here. This is a great group of women, and I'm so excited to be included in this. So I am Amanda Balmer, and I graduated from Penn State University with a bachelor's in criminal justice. I am a certified fraud examiner and a certified anti-money laundering specialist. And I currently serve as a board member for the PA chapter of the ACFE, so we call it the PACFE. I work at PSECU, which is a $9 billion credit union in PA that serves members in PA and throughout the country. And here I work as the director of financial crimes, where I oversee a phenomenal team of fraud investigators, fraud analysts, and we also oversee the fraud strategy. So I've been in the fraud industry for about 10 years. I love working at PSECU and helping people and helping to protect our membership. So thank you for having us.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. And Cindy, I don't know if you need an introduction because you're a regular on this podcast. So thank you for coming back. And Cindy, why don't you share with the audience your role at the corporate?
Thanks, Jamie. Happy to be back. I am the Vice President of Compliance and Fraud Risk here at Vizo Financial, and happy to be hearing from three of our member credit unions who are doing the hard work on a day-to-day basis. It's a little different at the corporate level than it is at the retail division. I did previously work in retail banking, so I have been in those shoes looking at that account activity on a regular basis. Some of it translates well into the corporate. Some of it is, we lose some of the details. So while we have many of the same responsibilities, it looks a little different in corporate world. I've been here at the corporate about 10 years. And we have a team of 3 folks, which I know sounds tiny to those of you at a large credit union. But again, it's a very different role that we have in this facility. We do the reviews and investigations that you folks are doing. We get the opportunity to do some training and provide some resources for our member credit unions. And there is never a dull day. I'll echo what the other ladies have said. I love working in compliance. It's been very rewarding and never not an interesting day.
All right. Well, Cindy, I'm going to kick off today asking you my first question. So from the corporate viewpoint, what types of fraud do you see growing the fastest at credit unions and why?
Well, as I just mentioned, it's different here at the corporate, what we get to see. I can't see unusual deposits into someone's account or the details of some of the things that are happening at the retail. But our viewpoint at a corporate is that we get to see activity from hundreds of credit unions. So we do get to see everything that's happening. All types of fraud come across our desk on a regular basis. And even if it's not something that we're identifying and investigating, we're getting outreach from our member credit unions asking about how to handle specific types of fraud or what are next steps, who should they be contacting. So we love being able to be that resource beyond just what we're seeing. So I can't see new account fraud. It's not going to hit my radar of what we get to look at. But we do regularly see check fraud, wire fraud, that those are areas that we can identify a little more readily. And just when you think checks really are going to go away, check fraud's spiking again. It just, that is a channel that just won't stop and is still a resource for fraudsters to be utilizing on a regular basis.
All right. Thank you. So Lauren, are you seeing, those types of fraud at the credit union, the check fraud and wire fraud? And, are there other frauds, that are growing fast that you're seeing as well?
Absolutely. I mean, everything Cindy said, we see on a daily basis. The check fraud, it's funny you say that, Cindy. Once we think it's going away, it circles back again. I wanted to mention 2 things that we see a lot prevalent. The check fraud, for sure, it's often linked to stolen mail and then altered checks or possibly just checks being counterfeited. And those regulations are very different when it comes to a counterfeit check versus an altered check. It's really insane how these fraudsters have just gained this skill to be able to do this kind of thing. So the check fraud's never going away. We see that a lot with our new account fraud. It seems that these individuals almost know what they're doing right when they open the account. They know they're doing that bad check deposit, and then they're trying to make a fast one and get away. The other thing that we are seeing that is a big trend is, unfortunately, an attack at the credit unions, I would say specifically, because it's resulting from phishing and smishing threats. So those emails and those text messages going out purporting to be your financial institution. And so you're holding that trust, you're holding that, the trust to talk to them and to give them the information you think they're asking for, when in turn, it's resulting in a whole-blown hacker account takeover. And those are really, really getting more prevalent in today's day and age.
Wow. So, Amanda, what are the red flags that organizations as well as individuals should look for to detect this potential fraud?
So the key to being able to identify those red flags is to really establish that baseline, understand the typical expectations for your organization and within that individual's account. So what is the normal? For example, how does that individual usually make deposits? How do they normally withdraw? What is the normal amount? Do they use digital banking? Do they come into the branch to transact? So once you understand the norm, then you're able to employ those tactics and tools to really identify those deviations from the norm. Those tactics and tools could be vendors and software that you deploy. They could also be trained staff. So I know in the industry, we really use this example a lot to identify or to explain the deviations. You have a risky digital banking login. So somebody that resides and usually transacts in Pennsylvania all of a sudden has a login from Nigeria. I think we all know to look out for that type of deviation, but it's equally important to look out for those less obvious deviations because fraud is becoming more sophisticated these days. So for example, if your member usually does ACH transactions to get deposits into their account, they might deposit a $100 check every once in a while as a Christmas gift or a birthday gift, but then suddenly they have a $2,500 check. You might need to take a closer look at that. That could be a warning sign that they're caught in an online job scam, for example. So being able to really identify what's normal for your member, but also making sure that you have those tools and the data analytic tactics that are smart enough to allow you to better mitigate that risk is going to be really important. And then one other thing that I do want to mention is we focus a lot on what we as an organization can do to identify those red flags, but also as a credit union, we need to give our members the ability to monitor their own activity so that they can identify those red flags, so that they can prevent that headache in the future. So making sure that you have those account alerts that could alert them quickly about unexpected activity. They can identify those alerts and identify, this is not what I was expecting to see in my account, and contact you quicker than you might be able to identify those red flags. So it's really important to make sure that we have that partnership between us and our members to help us detect those red flags as quickly as possible.
All right. Thank you. So Michele, what are some of the key components of a proactive fraud prevention strategy?
Absolutely. So to talk a little bit further about what Amanda was saying, identifying red flags is key. So there's a few different components: fraud prevention, of course, using your technology. So if you invest in technology, utilize the technology to its fullest. Try to get your data into almost real time, if possible. Try to get in front of the fraud before the fraudster gets to our members. So we try to prioritize our fraud in a strategy. Where is the biggest risk? So where our members, if they're in branch, we know that we've trained our front office employees to identify the red flags. So they're actually going to be talking to our members. So there's going to be that personal interaction. Our mobile deposits, our ATM deposits, there's no interaction with our members. So we are going to prioritize looking at those deposits first. Online compromise. So we've created a strategy of looking at interactions where there is none as a priority first. Consumer ACH, there's no interaction. Prioritize those first. Try to get that data in as real time and more often. And maybe in branch a little bit less. So there's a little bit less focus on that and more focus on some of the other things where there's no interaction with our members. Also, education. We are trying to educate more on the trends that are happening. And if we do have an incident, we try to train as quickly as possible to try to prevent that from happening again. If it happens once, learn from it and train and try to get that word out to try to prevent further fraud loss. And also have good internal controls. So we try to have good internal controls. And I know a further question down is balancing internal controls and member experience. You have to have that, of course. So we try to do that as well and communicate amongst the different parties. So, and if we are rolling out some different technology, we try to look for technology that will detect that suspicious activity before it even gets into Patriot. So, for example, mobile deposit, will it pick up on some of those fraud indicators, like the signature that's written over 3 times or the wash check before it even gets into the system? Don't even let it in, kick it out. If it's a suspicious IP address and we've already identified it, we don't even want it to even we don't want the deposit. So we're looking at bettering the technology that we have in place. And so those are some of the different strategies that we have and a good fraud policy. So there's many different components from policy to internal controls to technology to education. So those are some of the key factors that we have at Patriot.
All right, Amanda. So how important is cross-department collaboration in your fraud prevention efforts?
This question coming after what Michele just said is perfect because Michele was really focusing on that training. It really is important to remember that while we do have these fraud teams that are specialty and designed in fighting fraud, it's not possible to prevent fraud alone. So it's really critical for all of our departments to be aligned for that effective fraud prevention. So this includes the frontline staff, that might be the tellers in the branches or those call center individuals, the people that are getting that first contact with your member. But this also includes the back office roles like data analytics. And everyone really needs to come together to understand how their role is important in preventing losses for not only your membership, but also for your credit union. So for the frontline staff, Michele talked about this already, how important that training is. Those staff need to understand not only what is a red flag, but what to do if they see a red flag. For example, somebody comes into the branch and they're glued to their phone, they're trying to quickly deposit and withdraw money. Those tellers need to identify, yes, that is a red flag, but what do? They need to know not to cash that check. They need to intervene at that point, whether that's calling the fraud team or whether that's telling the individual that they just need some time to review. They need to be able to know what to do to prevent that loss to the member at that time. Then on the back end, for the back office individuals, they need to understand like data analytics. They'll need to understand the different types of fraud that you're seeing at the credit union, and you need to help them to understand how that tracking can help you see those trends. So that knowledge will help them to better structure their data, better create alerts, what is normal and what is not normal, so that you can review quickly. It'll help them to better generate reports to enhance your fraud prevention strategies. So really, it is that big team effort. Having that emphasized also from the top down will help you to strengthen the efforts to best protect your organization and your membership.
All right. Well, Michele, you kind of, started talking a little bit about it. So how do you balance fraud prevention with a seamless member experience? Because everyone wants a great experience when they're, connecting with their financial institution.
Right. One of the things at Patriot that we have is called a fraud committee. And on that fraud committee, I chair the fraud committee. So we also have representation not only from our contact center, which is member experience related, and also our front offices, is that we get into member experience. How do we balance fraud? What kind of fraud are we experiencing? We dissect incidents, fraud incidents. How do we make it better for our members? If we have fraud losses, how did that impact the members? So having member losses is not a good member experience. So we try to balance we want to serve our members, but yet we also can't serve the fraudsters. So once the fraudsters know, okay, you just opened up what the total balance is or the funds available within mobile deposit, you just increase that, they're going to know that. But that's also serving our members well. So we also have to keep track of that trend. How much are we starting to see in losses now that we increase possibly that limit? So we do watch, as Amanda was saying, our data. We're watching to see what our trends are. It's all on communication and working together. And a previous presentation, it's breaking down those silos and working together as teams and sharing data, sharing information. And when you're rolling out new products, how can you balance fraud plus member experience and say, this is the risk we're willing to take, but yet balance the member experience and say, this is the fraud risk. But the fraud committee does serve us well. And we do look at incidents. As I said, we look at those. We try to say, do we need to take a step back from where we started and maybe look at this again and revise our strategy. We also do look at our data and what is trending. If I go back to what Lauren was saying with the smishing, when we start to see an increase in the smishing attacks, we also start to see digital wallet fraud increase. And so we might start to look, do we need to change some of our parameters within digital wallet? Do we need to change some of our parameters within online banking and some of our different strategies? So we're always looking to adjust to make things better, not only for our member, because if we allow the fraudsters to take advantage of our members, that's not a good member experience.
Right. Yeah, I think somebody told me that for me, because obviously I work in the marketing department, so I kind of focus on, the member experience. I was told that I need to get comfortable with a little bit of member friction. So I keep
Absolutely.
that in mind when I'm thinking of new things to do with the membership is that level of friction from time to time.
And we'll look at our total number of members and then how many how many members are truly being impacted by this fraud. And it might be minimal, and we have a, chain of reporting as who do we continue to escalate things to and, different committees. And there's just that ongoing communication, and that definitely helps.
All right, Lauren, are there any fraud schemes that surprised you in their sophistication or their impact?
Well, I think in general, they're all very sophisticated. A lot of these trends are constantly emerging. I always say that if the fraudsters use their sophistication and intelligence to do good in the world, it would be such a better place. But that's why we're all here for job security. I think what surprises me the most, because I know that they're just very intelligent, sophisticated, but they're always 2 steps ahead. The moment we think they're caught up with them, they're already ahead of us onto a new trend or doing something different. We are a little bit smaller than, we're on the smaller scale, I would say, of credit unions and PA. And sometimes we hear about the fraud and then 2 months later, we start to see it. That was really big last year for us with the counterfeit treasury checks. We heard about it at a conference and 4 months later, it started hitting Belco. And we had probably close to 10 of those come through. And that was big for us. I think recently, though, a big impact we had back in March, we were experiencing those smishing and phishing attacks, spoofing our phone number, pretending that we were texting them, which we don't do that currently. In the future, we might, but we don't text you if we have concerns about your account being taken over. And all of these individuals, they're being manipulated and thinking they're talking to the fraud department and that they're getting assistance with these unauthorized transactions. And it was just so intriguing to hear from these members and hear the social engineering being used by these fraudsters to truly manipulate these vulnerable people who are in a state of panic, who know that their account might be taken over and it's not, but they're not thinking rationally in that moment. And I think that's where the fraudsters really try to get these people, is get them vulnerable and get them in a moment where they won't think clearly. I will say that this was a big takeaway for our team in general. We were working on updating our MFA codes that go out to individuals, multi-factor authentication. And it now states directly in the beginning of our text or email to stop, to caution. If you didn't request this, call us immediately, stop by a branch. And I will say that we've seen a really good increase in that, which is really cool. So for once, I feel like we got a little bit ahead of them, and they might have messed with us for 2 weeks. But yeah, that is still just something that surprises me, is just the social engineering that they use to truly manipulate and make these vulnerable people just believe them over their own credit union. They really do. They will believe the fraudster going into the branch and trying to withdraw their $10,000 cash because they're being told to go to a Bitcoin ATM. And our frontline staff that we train and educate, and they ask questions, are you being coerced to withdraw this? Can we help you? And they still, unfortunately, sometimes just trust the fraudster more than they trust their own credit union or financial institution.
Wow. Last week's episode, I did a whole episode on social engineering, and it's amazing. I mean, obviously, yes, they're going for those emotions. They're instilling some level of fear and emergency, and it's crazy how successful the social engineers are. And I mean, that's their full-time job, and that's what I think is the crazy part, is they go to work each and every day, just like you and I do, to do that, and it so blows my mind. But thank you.
After all this time, me too.
So Michele, you kind of were talking a little bit about data analytics there. How can financial institutions leverage data analytics to identify and prevent these fraudulent activities?
Absolutely. But first, before we get into the data analytics, I want to change gears a little bit on a different set of data. So yes, we're so used to looking at data analytics from a report standpoint and what our system provides to us. But let's not forget about our employees. Sometimes they provide us the best data that we need to use. Listen to the voice of our employees. So recently, we just had a fraud focus group, and we selected employees from different departments who are experiencing fraud. The loan department's experiencing different types of fraud. Our account opening department is experiencing different fraud, the front office. So we gathered them for a little over an hour, and we had a list of questions, and we gathered feedback from each of those individuals with a specific set of questions, with a goal to carry that back to the fraud committee on how are some things that we can do differently, how we can tackle fraud better. So we're set in our, fraud that we think we might know what we need to do, but let's hear the employees and what are some of their ideas. So we gathered some great feedback that tomorrow I take to fraud committee, and I hopefully will be implementing some of those ideas, which is member education, some pop-ups that we can put on our online banking right within our mobile site as soon as the members log in. They gave us great ideas, even to what they are hearing, what they are seeing from the fraud standpoint, that we just needed to pick their brains a little bit and get it down on paper and then share it with fraud committee and make some of those things happen. So let's not forget about some of our best data can come internally from our employees. But from the data analytics standpoint, we look for patterns all day long. We look for peaks. And when we start to see peaks, there's something driving those peaks, and let's dissect it to see what we can find. Trend. Also sharing information. Let's be honest, we're not trying to get the fraudster. So the more information we can share, I know I collaborate with Lauren and her team, and we're sharing information back and forth. And with another local FI in Franklin County. So we try to share data, what you're seeing, because if you're seeing it, most likely we'll see it also. And then, as I mentioned earlier, if you have data, challenge your technology team, get that data put into your system, because it's possible it can happen. And we have seen our fraud losses very minimal because we are able to get in front of that. If the data can be captured, utilize that data, utilize your reports. Who's looking at your reports? Because then utilize that information to say, look, here's our trend. This is what we're seeing. This is the increase in our losses. And take that information for change management. If there was a change that was made, then talk about it. Say, this is the most recent change that was made, and this is how it increased our losses. So those are some things that we definitely utilize our data analytics to look for. And we're also looking at IP addresses, as Amanda was saying, different countries, logging in, accessing online banking. We keep up with FATF. What is FATF seeing as high-risk countries? Don't miss what some the reports that are out there and utilize that information. So those are some of the things that we definitely utilize data analytics for. We live in data, I would say, the same way that Amanda was talking about. I can't imagine going back from even a couple years ago when we really didn't look at data all that much. You waited for it to come to you and then you just work backwards. And now I can't imagine not having it in front of you. So.
Wow. Well, thank you. So then, Lauren, how can whistleblower programs be structured to effectively identify and report fraudulent activities?
So I would say definitely having a clear and concise written whistleblower policy is what you're going to need for your institution or organization. For a whistleblower program to be structured effectively, there should absolutely be a high level of privacy when it comes to reporting within. Folks are going to be a lot more likely to come forward when they know their identity is going to be protected, and there's going to be zero type of retaliation that will be taken against them if they come forward with concerns. Once you have that privacy baseline established, a proper coordination with an investigation should occur. Here, that'll be between HR, security, fraud, and legal.
All right. Amanda, can you discuss a common financial fraud scam and lessons learned from it?
Yeah, so I know Lauren has already touched on this, but the spoofing, in the financial and government sectors, those phishing and smishing scams are extremely common. So for credit unions where we've seen this happen, again, fraudsters will often pose as employees from the fraud department. They'll spoof that company's phone number and it'll make them appear legitimate to that individual that they're targeting. They'll often call and claim to try to verify unusual charges. This disarms that victim because that victim is believing that the fraudster that is calling them is on their side and trying to prevent the fraud as well. So once they establish that trust, then those targeted individuals are tricked into providing login credentials, providing re-authentication codes. Some of the key things that we've learned from this, since everyone was experiencing it, Michele touched on this already, how important collaboration is. Working with those other credit unions, other financial institutions who are experiencing that kind of fraud, that's extremely important. We can figure out what worked, what didn't, without having to test it on our own. Also figuring out what are those warning signs to really look out for. Scams like this also highlight the importance of that member education. It's making sure you're really meeting the member where they are. So that means using social media posts, using blog posts, notifications in online banking, emails, even in-person seminars. You need to make sure that those members are best prepared for when they do get that call, because it's just a matter of time that they will be targeted by those fraudsters. The biggest thing is with these types of scams in modern fraud, they're targeting victims of all ages, all financial statuses. Fraudsters are valuing the personal information just as much as quick money because they can sell the information, the personal information, to allow other people to commit identity theft or get access into those accounts to use as mule accounts. So with that, it's just making sure that you're really taking a look at what's going on, collaborating, and working with your members to prevent those types of fraud.
All right. So Cindy, we have some larger credit unions joining us today. So, I mean, not all credit unions probably have, the teams that these institutions do. So what advice would you give to smaller institutions that may not have these large fraud teams?
Sure. And that's a lot of our membership don't have large dedicated teams to do that. People are wearing many hats and being asked to understand many things. So while I would encourage larger credit unions as well, especially smaller credit unions, they need to understand that fighting fraud lives with every member of the staff, whether it's the person taking a loan application, the teller at the at the teller window, or it's your back office staff. All of us have a role and responsibility to be looking out for. I would encourage people to ask questions. You need to get comfortable asking questions. I always feel uncomfortable when somebody says, "You guys are just so suspicious." I don't necessarily. I think we're inquisitive, and so all of your employees need to get comfortable with that. They need to learn when something doesn't feel right, something doesn't sound right. When I'm coming in and depositing a check and the pay or the originator in the check is from Oklahoma. Why would I be getting a payroll check from Oklahoma? My frontline staff needs to be comfortable asking questions, questioning that. A smaller credit union, generally speaking, has a few less of those digital platforms and channels. They're doing a lot more talking to their membership, and their staff really needs to be comfortable talking with members, asking questions, and talking to each other. I mean, we've alluded to that. A couple of people have talked about that interdepartmental conversation. Great ideas come from other areas. People have thoughts. So you want to train your staff, you want to educate your membership, and you want to use every resource that's available to you. Lauren mentioned about something she heard at a conference and hadn't seen yet, but did see later. That's how you can arm yourself, be prepared for it, potentially set up some defenses, or at the very least, an awareness among your staff of some of these channels. Do they know to look really carefully at the email address when it purports to be from your CEO, who you know is out of the office? Are they going to fall for that and wire a significant amount of money that is a loss to your credit union, not just your membership? So I would hope that people would be ask more questions and consider how they'd feel if the person that was being scammed was themselves, their children, their parents. As Jaime knows, I have a real soft spot for elder financial abuse. That's a vulnerable population that is often the victim of that. Some of our small credit unions have a very their data skews that to an older population. They need to be thoughtful about that. Maybe they need to go to a retirement community or a senior center and do some outreach, play some scam bingo, do some opportunities to have that outreach with membership. So you would use those resources that you've got internally and externally, and talk to each other is the most important thing.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining me today. As you can see, we could probably keep talking about fraud for a lot longer, which is why I asked all of them on screen today to join me in an actual webinar to talk about fraud. So we're going to regroup together on June 24th at 2 p.m. It's a free webinar to Vizo Financial's member credit unions. And we're going to have the same conversation. We're going to have a few more questions and give everyone a little more opportunity to talk. So you can register on Vizo Financial's website at www.vfccu.org. This episode of Financial Minds, it's brought to you by Vizo Financial's Risk Management Solutions. Strengthen your security offense with an ally. At Vizo Financial, we've teamed up with some of the best risk companies in the industry, Defense Storm, Fortra, KnowBe4, to offer a full suite of risk management solutions, including fraud prevention, threat surveillance, social engineering testing, penetration testing, and vulnerability scanning. To learn more about those services, visit Vizo Financial's website at www.vfccu.org or contact your Vizo Financial corporate account manager to learn more. Thank you so much, Michele, Lauren, Amanda, Cindy. Really appreciate you taking the time to join me today and talk about fraud.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you so much, Jaime.
Oh, you're welcome. For everyone out there, thank you for listening and make it a great day.